Have you ever received a standing ovation from the same crowd that witnessed your silent humiliation? I have. My name is Lydia, and for 7 years, my life was the perfect melody everyone at the Divine Harvest Community Church loved to hear. I was Pastor Samuel's wife, the angel at the piano, the embodiment of the virtuous woman. My hands, which once dreamed of playing in concert halls, were taught to play only hymns of worship. My smile, once spontaneous, became a mask of serenity to hide the screams I swallowed in the dead of night. They saw me as blessed. They had no idea that the pastor's house, the home that was supposed to be a refuge of peace, was a branch office of hell on earth, a private hell ruled by a man who preached about the love of God in public and crushed me with the weight of the Bible in private. Today, sitting at the piano he once tried to steal from me, I don't tell this story to profane faith, but to honor it, because it took descending into the deepest abyss to rediscover what faith truly means. It's not about blind obedience. It's about the courage to set yourself free. And my liberation was the most beautiful and devastating performance that church had ever seen. It all started in a small town in North Carolina, where my name, Lydia, was synonymous with music. From the age of 6, my fingers found a home on the keys of my grandmother's old piano. Music wasn't what I did, it was who I was. The daughter of a carpenter and a seamstress, I had no luxuries, but I had a gift that people said was divine. At 22, I was the lead organist at our local Baptist church. I gave lessons to children, and I dreamed of attending the conservatory in Charlotte. My faith was like my music, simple, sincere, and from the heart. I loved God, I loved my community, and I believed my talent was a gift to be shared. It was at a church convention in Charlotte, but I saw him for the first time, Pastor Samuel. He wasn't from my denomination. He led a fast-growing, independent church in a bustling suburb, the Divine Harvest Community Church. He was 35, 10 years my senior, with a stage presence that electrified the room. When he preached, it wasn't with the quiet calm of my pastor. It was with fire, with passion. He spoke of a God of miracles, of prosperity, of a grand purpose for every believer. And his eyes seemed to pierce through the crowd and speak directly to my soul. That night, after the service, he approached me. "Sister, the Lord told me there was a special talent in this place today. And when I heard you play during the worship, I knew it was you. Your music is anointed." I was speechless. No one had ever described my music that way. He invited me for coffee the next day. We talked for hours. I told him about my dream of studying music formally. He talked about his vision of building the largest church in the region, a ministry that would touch thousands of lives. "A man of God needs a helpmate who understands the calling," he said, holding my hand across the table. "Someone whose art can serve a purpose greater than the stages of the world." In that moment, he wasn't just flirting. He was rewriting my dream. And I, a young woman from a small town, dazzled by this charismatic man full of purpose, began to believe that his dream was better than mine, that our courtship was a whirlwind. He would drive to my town on weekends. He showered my family with gifts, charming my parents with his biblical knowledge and his vision. To them, a pastor was the best possible match for their musician daughter. "He'll take care of you, honey," my mother would say. Her eyes shining that Samuel was romantic and attentive. He talked about how our union would be a dual ministry, how my music would be the soundtrack to his sermons. The idea of the conservatory was replaced by the idea of being the minister of music at his church. It seemed nobler, more important. 6 months later, he proposed to me at the altar of his church after a Sunday service. The entire congregation erupted in ecstatic applause. I, at 23, accepted through tears, believing I was at the center of God's perfect will. I didn't know I was actually signing the contract for my own servitude. Our wedding was the event of the year at Divine Harvest Community Church. I moved to his city into the spacious pastor's house next to the church. The first few months were a dream. I was the new first lady, admired and respected. Samuel treated me like a queen. We hosted dinners, received leaders, and I led the music ministry with passion. The first sign that paradise had high walls came about 3 months in. I was practicing a piece by Chopin on the living room piano, a piece I have loved since I was a teenager. Samuel walked in with an expression I'd never seen, a sort of restrained impatience. "Lydia, honey, that music is very beautiful," he said, "but it's melancholic. Don't you think your time would be better spent composing new arrangements for the Sunday hymns?" "But, Samuel, I need to practice to keep up my technique. This is for me." He came over, sat beside me on the piano bench, and closed the sheet music. "Your time is for the ministry now, my love. Your technique should serve God, not dead men like Chopin. The Lord is not pleased with a divided heart." The way he used God's name to invalidate my personal desire left me without a response. I felt a pang of shame, as if my love for classical music was a sin of selfishness. From that day on, I stopped. Playing Chopin. The second change was more subtle. I began to notice him making veiled criticisms of my old friends from my hometown. "That friend of yours, Clara, she doesn't seem to lead a very Christ-centered life, does she?" he'd say after. I got off the phone. He never forbade me from seeing them, but he created such a climate of disapproval that I began to pull away myself. To avoid conflict, to be the wife who causes no trouble. Hell didn't arrive all at once. It was built brick by brick with the noblest materials: love, care, spiritual zeal. And the first, in my devotion and naivety, helped build my own prison. The following years were a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, an erosion of my identity so gradual that I barely noticed what I was losing. Samuel's abuse was sophisticated, divided into fronts that attacked every pillar of my existence. First came the financial control, disguised as biblical stewardship. At the beginning of our marriage, I still gave a few private piano lessons. He praised my initiative, but suggested that to honor God, all the money should go into a joint family ministry account. "What's yours is mine, and what's mine is the Lord's," he'd say with a pious smile. Naively, I agreed. Within a year, I didn't have a single dollar to my name. Every expense, from groceries to a pair of shoes, had to be justified and approved by him. If I questioned it, the answer was always the same. "Is your heart set on material things, Lydia?" A woman of God trusts in the provision of her husband, who is the priest of the home. Then came the social isolation, the cruelest stage. My family lived far away, and visits became rare. Samuel would always arrange an unmissable church commitment that coincided with their visits. My old friends were subtly labeled as worldly, bad influences. Slowly, my only social circle became the church members, people who saw him as a demigod. I befriended one of the sisters, Sister Teresa, but Samuel quickly intervened. "Be careful, dear. Sister Teresa has a spirit of gossip. The pastor's wife must be an example, not mix in conversations that do not edify." He surrounded me, leaving me with him as my only point of reference for friendship and trust. The final blow was the nullification of my art, the piano. Once my source of joy and expression became a work tool for his ministry, he began to dictate the arrangements, forbidding any melody that sounded too sad or too complex for the congregation to understand. "Worship has to be simple, Lydia, so that the humblest person can sing along," he would explain. "But what?" he meant was that the music had to be predictable, controllable, devoid of my soul, my signature. My talent was no longer mine. It was a church asset managed by him, One day, I disobeyed. Feeling a deep longing for myself, I began to play an old folk lullaby my grandmother had taught me. It was a simple melody, full of pain and beauty. He walked into the room and said nothing. He just stood there, watching me with a cold gaze. When I finished, he approached, placed his hand over mine on the keys, and squeezed with a strength that frightened me. "Don't play that again," he said, his voice low and dangerously calm. "That music brings a spirit of sadness into this house. And our house is a house of victory." That night, for the first time, I was afraid of him. Physically afraid that it was. During this time that I met Sister Esther, a widow of nearly 70, one of the first members of the church. Unlike the others, who regarded me with an almost frightening reverence, Esther looked at me with compassion. She saw the dark circles my makeup couldn't hide, the thinness behind the elegant dresses, the smile that didn't reach my eyes. She never said anything directly. Then she started bringing me small gifts, a book of poetry hidden inside a hymnal, a slice of cake, just for you, my child. Eat it before the pastor gets home. They were small acts of complicity, beacons of light in my darkness. "You have the hands of an artist, Lydia," she told me one day as I was helping her arrange flowers for the altar. "Don't let anyone turn your hands into tools." That sentence stayed with me, a seed of rebellion planted in the arid soil of my submission. I started writing my own music in secret, melodies and lyrics that spoke of my pain, my longing, my confused faith. I wrote on small scraps of paper and hid them in the lining of an old suitcase in the attic. It was my only act of true freedom. The situation reached a breaking point in our 7th year of marriage. The church was launching a major campaign to build a cathedral temple, a pharaonic project that was Samuel's greatest obsession. The pressure for donations was immense. He preached fiery sermons about sacrifice, about giving everything to God. One day, I received news that my father, in my hometown, was very ill, cancer. I needed to go see him. When I told Samuel, his response was a punch to the gut. "Lydia, I understand your concern, but this is a crucial moment for God's work. Your absence now, as the worship leader, would be a terrible testimony to the congregation. We need to show faith. We will pray for your father, and the Lord will heal him. Samuel, I need to see my father. He could be dying. Death is but a passage for those who believe, dear. Your primary loyalty is to God and the ministry He has entrusted to us. To leave your post now would be an act of disobedience." That night, he didn't need to shout or touch me. The cruelty of his words was the worst violence I had ever suffered. He was using my father's terminal illness as a test of my faith, of my level of submission to him. In the early hours of the morning, I made my decision. While he slept, I packed a small bag, took the money Sister Esther had been helping me secretly save for months. She sold her embroidery and gave me a share, saying it was for a woman's needs. I went to the attic and retrieved my collection of secret songs. I left a simple note on the kitchen table. Went to see my father. Don't look for me. The escape was the easy part. What came next was the real war. My father passed away 2 weeks after I arrived. I spent those last days by his side, holding his hand, singing the old lullabies he loved. After the funeral, I decided not to return. I stayed in my parents' house, an empty place now, but it was mine. Samuel's reaction was calculated and brutal. First he called, alternating between pleas and threats. When he realized I wouldn't return, he began his public campaign. From the pulpit, he announced to the church that his wife, influenced by spirits of rebellion and the enemy, had abandoned her home and her divine calling. He asked for prayers for my lost soul. I was excommunicated from the church for abandoning my home and for rebellion. Friends of years, people I had counseled and led, stopped answering my calls. I received letters and messages calling me a Jezebel, a traitor to God's work. He had succeeded in completely isolating me, turning me into the villain of the story. Months, I lived in a deep grief. Grief for my father, for my marriage, for my faith, for the community I had loved and that now hated me. It was Sister Esther who saved me. She traveled to my town. She knocked on my door, and when I saw her, I collapsed into her arms. "They may have taken your church, my child," she said, "but they cannot take your God, and they cannot take your music." With her support and that of an old childhood friend, a lawyer named Jonah, I began to plan my counterattack. Jonah was shocked to hear my story. "Lydia, what he did isn't just spiritual abuse, it's financial abuse. The church is a legal entity, and you, as his wife during the years of its greatest growth, have rights." That's when we found the leverage. During his sermons on sacrifice, Samuel had convinced dozens of members to donate property, cars, and savings directly to him in his personal name, not the church's, as a love offering to the man of God. He was building a private empire with the faithful's money, and I, as his wife under community property law, was legally entitled to half of it. Revenge, if I wanted it, could be financial. I could sue him, take half of his secret fortune, and watch him fall into disgrace, but I didn't want his money. I wanted something far more valuable. I wanted my voice back. The plan was born from a conversation with Jonah and Esther. The church was about to celebrate its 10th anniversary, the climax of the new Cathedral Temple campaign. It would be a grand event with guest pastors from all over the state, and I knew that to keep up appearances, Samuel would need the prodigal wife to return, even if for one night, to present a picture of reconciliation and forgiveness. Jonah contacted the church's lawyer, proposing a deal. Lydia would not file a contentious divorce lawsuit and would not reveal the pastor's financial irregularities. In return, she asked for only one thing: the right to perform at the anniversary event, to sing a special song of repentance and reconciliation. For the entire congregation. Samuel, seeing the opportunity to paint himself as the gracious, forgiving husband, and fearing the financial scandal, took the bait. He agreed with one condition: he needed to approve the song's lyrics in advance. I sent him the lyrics to an old, harmless hymn about forgiveness. He approved. What he didn't know was that I would not be singing that song. The night of the anniversary event arrived. The new cathedral was packed, over 1,000 people. The atmosphere was electric. I sat in the front row, in the seat reserved for the pastor's wife, dressed in a simple gown with an expression of rehearsed humility. Samuel preached a moving sermon about the power of forgiveness, using my return home as his greatest example. Many in the congregation were in tears. Then the moment came. He called me to the stage. And now, to seal this night of victory and restoration, my beloved wife, Lydia, whom the Lord has brought back to us, will grace us with a special song of praise. I walked to the grand piano at the center of the stage. The silence was absolute. My fingers trembled, but not from fear, from anticipation. I looked at Samuel, seated on his throne-like chair on the stage, smiling, satisfied with his triumph. And then I began to play. It was not the hymn he had approved. It was a melody I had composed in the attic of the pastor's house, a song no one had ever heard. The lyrics were my story. I built your house with notes of praise. I painted the walls with the color of my pain. I served your feast, and I smiled through your lie, while my silent soul was beginning to die. I saw the confusion on Samuel's face, his smile freezing. The congregation murmured, trying to understand. I continued, my voice gaining strength. You used his holy name to put me in chains. You said that my dreams were a mortal sin, but the God I serve doesn't live in a cage, and today my music will break from this stage, dot dot. At that moment, a large screen behind the stage, which was supposed to display biblical verses, lit up. But it wasn't verses, it was copies of documents. Bank deposits in Samuel's personal name, property titles, the irrefutable proof of his secret empire, compiled by Jonah and projected by a sound technician, an old friend of mine, who was secretly on my side. I continued to sing, now looking directly at the stunned congregation. So this is my offering, my sacrifice of truth / suing in your temple in my reclaimed youth. You can excommunicate, call me Jezebel's name, but my voice is freedom, a holy flame. When the last note from the piano vibrated in the shocked silence of the cathedral, I stood up. I looked at Samuel. He was pale, defeated. His empire of lies had crumbled in 3 minutes of music. I didn't need to say another word. I just turned, walked off the stage, and proceeded down the central aisle, head held high as hundreds of people stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and for some, a dawning of understanding. I left the Divine Harvest community. Church behind that night, but I didn't leave my faith, nor my music. The scandal that followed was immense. Samuel lost the church, the followers, and to this day is facing lawsuits from the members he deceived. And me? I returned to my hometown. I used my father's inheritance to finally attend the conservatory. Today, at 45, I am a music professor and the director of a community choir. I found a small church where faith is lived with simplicity and love does not demand submission. I found a new love, a man who applauds my compositions and encouraged me to fly higher. My revenge was not taking Samuel's money. It was taking back what he had stolen from me, my voice. And by using it to sing my truth, I not only freed myself, but I also freed hundreds of others from the lie he had built. The hell I knew beside that pastor was not my final destination. It was just the furnace that taught me that the most powerful music, the most sincere prayer, is the courage to be who you truly are. And that melody no one will ever silence again.